What I've seen in my story, in my clients, and the women who've written to me after episodes of this show is that it's never confidence, it's instructions. The manual was written for someone else. Here's what Calladita culture does with this. It takes the instruction problem, which is external and systemic, the direct result of being the first many times, and it teaches us to internalize it. What happens when you finally name it as an instruction problem instead of a confidence problem? That's when we finally stop trying to fix ourselves and we start asking better questions. Because we stop asking, what is wrong with me? And instead, we begin asking, why did I never get to learn? And where do I go to learn it now? Sabrosura, papi, que. Hola, hola, welcome back to Café con Pan, the bilingual podcast that celebrates the power of our stories, the medicine in our voices, and the magic of reclaiming who we are. Pull up your cafecito, que este episodio es para ti. By the end of the episode, you're going to have a name for the thing you've been calling a confidence problem, which I'm so annoyed by. And once you have that name, I promise, it's going to change everything about how you see yourself. Both of my abuelas never used measurements when they cooked. And neither does my mom, frankly. Not once, unless they were baking. Pero cooking, no. No teaspoon, no cup, grams, no, cero. And I'm sure you resonate with this because you ask them how much salt and they look at you and they just say, al tanteo. Tú sabes cuánto es enough. And somehow, they always know. Somehow, us watching them helped us learn también. From feeling, from standing close enough to catch what they knew in their hands. And I didn't realize until much later in life that what my grandmothers were teaching me, what they were actually modeling, was a way to navigate a world that was never going to hand us the instructions. ¿Por qué? Porque we learn by feeling. We figure it out. We make something real out of nothing written down. And that is our superpower. Now, I want us to go back to my college days a long time ago. It's my first semester of college in the US. I've just finished high school in Mexico City. My English is functional, enough to get me here, enough to complete my college application, barely. And I walk into my English 101 class, and my professor says, your first assignment is to write an essay. And everyone around me just writes it down and they start. Everyone around me acts like they've done this before because they have done it before. They were taught the structure, the format, the rules, the paragraphs, the thesis statement, the topic sentences, the citations. There was a whole system, and somebody had handed it to my peers years ago when they were in high school, when they were maybe even in middle school. Pero nobody handed it to me. So I stared at the page for days, literal days. You know, I've always said I'm a recovering procrastinator. Those were my procrastination days where I wasn't even recovering. I would just stare at blank pages. The assignment sat there and I sat there with zero clue. I had no idea where to begin because I didn't have a map. Everyone seemed to have a map they were reading from and I didn't. The night before the paper was due, I took myself to good old Taco Bell. You want to sponsor us? I don't know. I don't need that much Taco Bell now, but hey. I got my reliable Baja Blast and a $1 burrito. And I sat down and wrote the whole thing in one night. From nothing. From feel al tanteo. And I got a C. And when I got my paper back with all those red lines and the big C at the top, I thought something was wrong with me. I thought I wasn't smart enough, that maybe this wasn't the place where I belonged. I thought that maybe everyone else had something I didn't have. And actually, I was right because they had something I didn't, but I was wrong about what it was. What they had was instructions. They had a manual. They had a set of rules that someone had handed them to them before they ever walked into that classroom. What I had was a Baja Blast and the stubbornness of a girl who learned to cook without measurements. Como tú, I'm sure. After the C, I had to learn. I had to learn what I do know now. But I went looking for help because I literally was 19 years old in a tiny town in the Midwest with nobody. Nobody could help me. It was me, myself, and I, and my phone calling my mom, but she couldn't help me from Mexico City. So I realized the only way through was to ask for help. And I found the Center for Multicultural Education on campus. You've heard me talk about the CME before. I walked in not knowing what to expect at all, but the name seemed inviting in some way. And a beautiful Black woman named Tay, who's the director at the time, she looked up from her desk and she hugged me. It's like she knew. It's like she was expecting me at some point. And I showed her my paper and I was like, I don't know what to do next. And what she told me was really powerful. She looked at my paper, she went through it, and she said, look, everyone struggles with their first C in college. Just remember, you can always improve moving forward. This is not at all the last paper you'll write, and you can only get better from here. Punto y se acabó, that's all she said. And I mean, she said more because I've shared this story before. This paper, I was profiled by my professor, and so she helped me with that. But my inner belief at the time that I was showing up with, she didn't fix it. She didn't fix me either. She fixed the story I was telling myself about my essay. She simply said, this isn't the end of the story. Keep going. And that gave me a lot of hope, and I did. And she gave me resources. So I went to the library, I found a tutor, I learned the rules. Citation was a whole new world because citation is different in Espanol y en Inglés. It was like, imagine a lot. Eventually, I started actually working with Tate directly, and I started planning multicultural events on campus. I started building community for students who looked like me, who came from where I came from, who came from places like where I came from, who were also sitting with pages they didn't know how to fill out. And my invitation to you is notice that I figured it out. I figured it out because I was resourceful enough to find it after the fact. And I think this is something that happens to us a lot. We kind of like show up to the thing and then we're like, oh, bummer, we don't have the manual. Well, we got to be stubborn in this case. I was stubborn enough to stay because, check this, my whole life, I'd been trained by women who cooked al tanteo. I had been trained my whole life to figure things out by feel without the written recipe. And I know you have too. And so this is when I will argue Latinas don't have a confidence problem. We do have an instruction problem. We've been told for years that first-gen Latinas struggle with confidence, that we have imposter syndrome, that we have self-doubt, that we have a belief that we don't belong. And I'm going to have a pretty hard hot take here that might get me canceled, but here, hey, I gotta say it because I believe it. What I've seen in my story, in my clients, and the women who've written to me after episodes of this show is that it's never confidence. It's instructions. The manual was written for someone else. The essay format, the networking script, the salary negotiation, the unspoken rules of corporate rooms, the way you're supposed to introduce yourself, the way you're supposed to ask for what you want, the way you're supposed to take up space without apologizing for it. None of that was handed to us. It was handed to other people. It was handed to my friends, and I later learned it through them. I'm sure you have too. Because in other homes it happens, in other schools it happens, in conversations, in other families, at dinner tables. But those dinner tables we were not invited to yet. Until we walked into the rooms, into the classroom, into the boardrooms, into the negotiation room, the interview without a map. And the good news is that we figure it out anyway, al tanteo, by feeling it out. And then someone called it a confidence problem. So I want to make it clear because I think we all need to hear this. We are not to be fixed. The instructions were written for somebody else. And we learned, we taught ourselves, we moved through it anyway. And that is the most extraordinary thing about us. Truly, if you think about it. Because one thing that I want us to understand is that the certainty gap was not built by our psychology. It was elevated by a system. And that, listener, I hope when you hear that, you realize that the way the certainty gap that we carry was built creates a different way for us to heal. Because it's nothing for us to fix, but everything for us to dismantle the system. Here's what Calladita culture does with this. It takes the instruction problem, which is external and systemic, the direct result of being the first many times, and it teaches us to internalize it. It teaches us to think of it as a personal failing. It tells us everyone else knows the rules and you don't, and this means that something's wrong with you. It says sometimes you got the C, which means you're not smart enough. It says you didn't know how to write the essay, which means you don't belong here. And so when we hear those whispers for years, sometimes decades, we try to fix something that was never broken. We take the confidence courses, we do the affirmations, we fake it till we make it, we do the mindset work. And that is just another way of saying we performed instructions we were never given while hoping nobody noticing that we are actually doing improv. We're improvising. So what happens when you finally name it as an instruction problem instead of a confidence problem? That's when we finally stop trying to fix ourselves and we start asking better questions because we stop asking, what is wrong with me? And instead, we begin asking, why did I never get to learn? And where do I go to learn it now? Because we're not going to victimize. We're just going to move forward, onward. We stop asking, why don't I belong? And instead, we say, who built this room and what were the rules they assumed everyone already knew? We stop asking, why do I always feel like I'm improvising? Instead, we say, I was never given the recipe. Of course, I'm cooking al tanteo and listen. We're gonna work with it. Hay conversaciones que nos enseñaron a callar, y dinero was one of them. Pero here's the truth. Tu dignidad financiera no debería depender de que traduzcas todo para tu mamá, tus tías, tu abuelita, o quien sea. Savvy Ladies just made it easier than ever to get financial help en español. Their free helpline means your mama can ask a question without you having to translate shame, confusion, or whatever her comadre told her. Talleres, clases, consejos, todo completamente gratis y con el respeto que nuestras familias merecen. Porque libertad financiera no es lujo, es necesidad. So whether it's you or your mama who's ready to take that first step, go to savvyladies.org. That is SAVVYLADIES.org. Empieza hoy. La dignidad financiera no se pide, se reclama. If you've started making your cafecitos at home to get on with that morning routine and build the habit of saving money, it could be a good strategy. Pero there might be an easier way to save. Did you know that if you open a new savings builder account at BMO, you can earn a $5 reward every month you grow your balance by $200 or more during the first year? Learn more about how BMO can help you grow your savings by visiting bmo.com/save. bmo.com/save. Conditions apply. Accounts provided in the United States by BMO Bank and a member FDIC. Here's the moment when I give you something to carry out of this episode. And of course, it's somatic because this time I don't want to give you a list or a framework or anything that you may need to write down. It's very simple. It's quite small and tiny, actually. And the invitation is for you to take this tool next time you walk into a room and feel that feeling that everyone else got a memo you didn't get, that you were skipped on the email, that they know something you don't, that you're somehow behind. So I want you to try something. We're going to use your index finger. And I wore the wrong shirt for this, but we're going to find your suprasternal notch, also known as the jugular notch. And if you see me take a breath, you see that little hole between your clavicle, your sternum. That's why it's called the jugular or suprasternal notch. And it's a little hole. And we're not going to dig into it. We're simply going to place our index finger and we're going to do tiny circles. Just like that. If you're watching me, you're seeing me. If you're listening, you put your index finger in that little indentation in the middle of your neck below your throat, above your collarbone. And you can find it if you take a breath, and you can simply start doing little tiny circles. Whichever way doesn't matter. Allow your body to connect to that circle you're doing with your finger. This can take as fast as 30 seconds. And as you're doing this, you simply say, I always figure it out. I'm resilient. I always find the answers. I got this. And you keep doing the little circles until you may feel a sigh of relief. You may yawn. You may feel some emotions move through. This is not an activation type of exercise. This is more of a relaxation in some way because it connects to your vagus nerve. 30 seconds is all you need. You don't have to repeat anything if you don't need to. You can just simply put your finger there. I've done it in meetings. Like people, I pretend that I'm like scratching myself. And it helps so much because it gives your nervous system a different story to run on. If you say the words that I said, if you don't say anything, you simply allow your body to get back to yourself. Because if we're a lot in our head, which is what we've been taught to do, is we just think. We don't feel. When you get back to the body, then your body can give yourself that sigh, can give yourself the moment. You can do it for 90 seconds. And then you allow the emotion to cycle through. And then you start realizing the lie the calladita culture told us, that the C meant something, we had something wrong with us. But the truth is that the C meant we showed up to a test we were never prepared for. And we stayed anyway. And that is the most Latina thing I've ever heard. Frankly. So that's your little exercise, okay? Now to close us off, mi abuela never wrote down her recipes because the knowledge lived in her hands, in her heart, in her body, in decades of cooking by feel. You don't write down what you know in your bones. Now that I have one abuela living, but she's far, and then the other one is gone, I have to figure out the recipes by memory, by smell, by tasting, by adjusting and adding a little more of this, a little less of that. Y todo es al tanteo and without instructions. And even if we were to call, she would just be like, what do you mean you don't know? And so we have to rely on ourselves, which I think it's really powerful that we've been taught since forever to listen to our bodies. Let's get back to it because we've been doing this our whole lives. Now, let's connect that to our careers. We show up to rooms that had rules we were never taught. We write essays on one night in a Baja Blast. We find the taste in our buildings. We build the recipe from memory because nobody left it written down for us. And I will say it once again, it's an instruction issue. We don't like confidence. We just don't have the instructions, and we get to solve them anyway every single time. Bueno, if this episode named something you may have been carrying without language, let me know. Share with your primas, with your colleague, with a woman in your life who's still calling her instruction problem a confidence problem. Because she may need to hear this. And if you want to understand the conditioning that taught you to see yourself as a problem in the first place, I have a free quiz, Galleta Culture quiz. It's free, 5 minutes max. I frankly think it takes you 3 minutes. And it will give you language for something you've been carrying your whole career. You can head over to cafeconpam.com/quiz. There's a link in the show notes. I am teaching a workshop on July 2nd. It's all about these topics that I've been talking about. It's called Rooted Immersion. It's going to be, I'm debating between 90 minutes and 2 hours, frankly, because you'll hear me say probably 2 hours, to be frank. And so we'll have the link in the show notes, or you can go to pamcovarrubias.com/leadership. Y bueno, nos vemos en la próxima. Notice your body signals, your body knows. You've been taught this since we were little, since we were watching our tías or abuelas or mamás cook without recipes. We've been taught to listen. Y bueno, nos vemos en la próxima. Como siempre, sigue brillando. Café con Pam is created con mucho amor by our small but mighty team. Content production by Nancy Jaimes. Podcast management by Maru Linardi. Social media and marketing by Brenda Figueroa. And me, your host, Pam Covarrubias. To keep the cafecito brewing and the healing flowing, join the Supporters Club for only $5 a month and access early episodes, behind-the-scenes vibes, and exclusive minisodes you won't hear anywhere else. Screenshot this episode and tag me and share what resonated. I love seeing your takeaways. Follow on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let's keep the conversation going with us on social media at Café con Pan Podcast, because your voice always matters there. We love being on Instagram and Facebook. Gracias for listening to Café con Pan, a Spread Ideas Move People production. For more episodes, guest info, or resources, visit cafeconpam.com. And if you're healing from calladita culture and don't know where to start, you can take the quiz. cafeconpam.com/quiz for tía wisdom and cariño just for you.
Sabrosura pa' ti que